And, we're QB hunting here, folks. QB hunting. We all know right now that we're more likely than not going to need to get a quarterback in the next draft. We've got 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, plenty of ammunition to go out there and start firing all shots. If we got one particular guy, we want to go pick. But I don't necessarily think that we're going to have just one particular guy, that we're looking for the freak show prospect, the 5-tool guy. He's got it all. I don't necessarily know that we're looking for that. I think they'd love to have that. They'd love to land that. But I do think that there's going to be a specific type of quarterback our Seahawks are going to look for in this upcoming draft. And nonetheless, they're going to look for one. One of these guys, one of these young up-and-coming quarterbacks on the college scene right now is more likely than not going to be a Seattle Seahawk. So we're going to do this as a normal segment here on the Hawks Nest, and that is to go through and look at where these guys are performing at in the current spot of this year as we go along. For my money, at least right now, let's take a look at the guys that are, essentially where I would put the top of the list as I'm kind of sitting right now. Now, you're free to definitely disagree with this list. It's not 100% going to be the final list that I put out. It's going to be fluctuating. It's going to be a little different. I'm going to go a little bit all over the board. Some of this list is pretty concurrent to what I've done in recent history in looking at these guys. But this is going to be a list based on what I've seen so far this year, in addition to the prior tape that I've watched of these guys, that being last year. A lot of guys on these lists started last year. It's part of why you're going to like these guys this year. You're not getting necessarily a lot of one-year wonders here. You are going to get guys who have multiple years of starting for their teams at the college level, which is a little bit more of a rarity now in this day and age. But let's start up with the first guy here, Will Levis. Will Levis, to me, has really been a number one guy for a little while now. He is for many different Seahawks fans out there. And at first blush, people go, well, why? Is this just lazy because you guys are all just sort of fall in love with the same guy? And so one guy hears from somebody else, another guy hears from somebody else, and then somebody else hears that. So then they just all by sort of an echo chamber decide we love Will Levis. I don't think it's that myself. I don't. I would tend to give people a little more credit than that, frankly. And I understand with Will Levis, when you look at the first blush of stats, you'll get concerned. You'll get concerned by 53.3 QBR, 4 INTs here to start this year off. You look at last year's stats, 21 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, and you've got a little bit of concern there in that respect. Well, he seems to be a little wild with the football. And indeed, he is a little bit wild with the football. His game is just a little bit wild. I do give college kids a little bit of room if their game's a little bit wild, though. It's a matter of, do I see the flashes of them being able to get it under control? And we'll get to his interceptions here really quickly in a second. He has started out pretty well this year out the gate. He's got a very nice signature win against Florida, where he's matched up against another prospect we're going to be talking about in a second, which is Anthony Richardson. He's thrown for a lot of yards. Definitely the interceptions there. The touchdowns are there too. But beyond that, you see it there in his mechanics, in his throwing motion, in his footwork. Everything is very clean, very polished. There's not a lot you pick apart in his delivery going, he's going to need to fix this. He's going to need to fix his front foot. Sometimes everything's just fluid and easy. And the ball is coming out, as far as a notable this year that I've seen different from last year. The ball is coming out at a little bit more RPMs. I would say it's a guy going from last year who was probably at a good 90, 92, 93 maybe on his fastball. And now you're seeing him hit 95, 96 occasionally on that fastball a little bit this year. Just a couple ticks this year that I'm seeing, which again, something that you might normally see on these college quarterbacks as they do go through their development. The interceptions are a concern for myself, but I do have a little bit of an explanation for that. And I'm not going to say it's the end-all be-all, because this does not explain away all the interceptions with Levis. This is just my reasoning behind why I give it a little bit more room. That being that, he's playing in a pro-style offense, and not just a pro-style offense. He's playing in your Seattle Seahawks offense. Yeah, he's playing literally the Los Angeles Rams, the McVay, the Waldron, vis-a-vis the Waldron offense. And so he's going to have a little bit of a easier transition to the pro game when you ask him to take snaps under center. He's going to have literally run these route concepts already in college and being very well aware of them and where to maybe avoid and where I can take a little bit more of a risk. That really does appeal to me considerably when you put all those other aspects together, being that he's clean as far as a prospect goes, as far as his arm talent, mobility, good, relatively fearless in the pocket, great arm strength, can layer the ball over the top when he needs to. And again, the mobility is awesome. He's, again, a little more wild in that respect, where he's going to get whacked a couple times because he doesn't get slid down, and he will take a little bit of a beating this year. You watch as he goes through, because he's not doing that. So that's a part where he needs to learn. He's not a finished prospect necessarily. And we also have to acknowledge he's going to be 24 years old coming out in this draft, which makes him a little bit older as well, as far as versus CJ Stroud, let's say, who's going to be a 21-year-old guy coming out. So maybe at that point you could look at Levis and say, well, maybe he's a little topped out. Why I like him for number one for our Hawks, beyond all the reasons I just mentioned, is that, again, I think he's going to be pro-ready. That 25-year-old age doesn't hold me back as much when I look at the fact that he's ready to go. I'm going to be able to insert him into the lineup from day one. And my theory on this has been that the Seahawks are trying to fit back to that 2012 blueprint that they implemented that helped them successfully get to back-to-back Super Bowls. With that approach, there was Legion of Booms within that, Marshawn Lynch's within that, and Russell Wilson's within that, but it was that approach of building the team first out, and then when you brought the quarterback in, not merely bringing a quarterback in, not merely bringing a talented quarterback in, but bringing in a talented quarterback who was pro-ready, who wasn't going to have to sit on the bench for 2 years like we watch the 49er fans as they wring their hands over the fact, well, was Lance going to take a year? Is he going to take 2? How long until he's going to finally be ready? I mean, when? And that's a little bit of a question you can end up asking when you get into that, going for those 21-year-old guys. At the end of the day, Levis's completion percentage is up this year. His average per attempt is up this year. His arm's looking stronger. He's definitely not necessarily been highly tested yet. The schedule is going to get tougher. And again, this is subject to change, this list, but I love what I see from Levis right now. He's my number one guy for your Seahawks. I would love to get my hands on this guy. I think he eventually, no matter what, will be minimum top 10 pick. Next up is that 21-year-old guy I was just talking about on my list. This is my number 2, and that is CJ Stroud out of Ohio State. CJ is a guy for a lot of people that is their number 1. He is neck and neck with my guy Will Levis right now. The difference between these guys is not distinct. It's not far. These are both, to me, top 10, maybe perhaps even top 5 first-round picks. He had a real tough game in the opener against Notre Dame, which was probably his stiffest competition of the year so far. He lost his main playmaker, the hyphen guy. I can't figure out how to say his name quite yet, but I'll learn how to say it eventually. But the guy that was going to take over for the 2 receivers he lost in this last draft with Olave and Wilson, who were drafted. So he was down a couple of guys. He's definitely light a few playmakers in that respect. They're trying to run the ball a little bit more there. But he did struggle a little bit in that Notre Dame game, and it was a little bit eye-opening. He didn't make any real bad mistakes necessarily, just wasn't making a lot of plays. He really cooked this last week to the tune of 367 yards, 5 touchdowns. They were out ahead of that game really, really early on. There's some standout throws with him that just always come back with me on him again and again. He'll make some throws that are so close where you'll feel like the cornerback's closing. The cornerback might have a chance on this ball, and the ball always gets through to just the perfect spot. And you question and you start to go, boy, he got away with one there. I think he got away with one. But then you come back and go, well, he makes that completion a lot though, where he can just trust his arm to have, I know I got enough to get there, and I know my ball placement is going to be so precise. It was really interesting watching on one throw where he throws it over the top in this game against Toledo, and there's 5 defenders over around the sideline route where he's got one guy. And he just drops that like a lollipops that ball right over the top of the 5 defenders all in space there. No one's even close to making a pick. No one's close to knocking the ball down. But it's that type of stuff that shows up time and time again. You guys seen it last year with him and Wilson, where he would throw those acrobatic tosses to Wilson, and Wilson would go up and have enough room in bounds to be able to go up 39, 40 inches in the darn air and then catch it, come back down, still get a foot in, because he would always put the ball inside to where it's not far out of bounds and you're just going to drift with the ball out of bounds. He's always going to keep you inside in his ball placement. It shows up over and over again of just how accurate he is. And it doesn't matter if it's a 5, 10-yard route, 20 yards down the field, he's going to put it right there on the spot that it needs to be. And sometimes astonishingly so. He also is doing a really good job this year, especially. I saw it last year, but it's even being built more. Quarterbacks, when they're going through their reads, sometimes you'll see their head move, but the rest of the body doesn't move as they go through their reads. So if I'm looking here, this is okay if I'm throwing to you, but if I got to throw over here to this side, I need to get my shoulders turned to that side and get set. And sometimes if I see it and then have to turn my to get the shoulders set, that's too late to get the ball and get it out. He's already getting his shoulders turned as he's going through his reads. It's unique to him. You'll watch it on tape and notice if you really look at it. And what that allows him to do is then that's where he's getting that accuracy, is the mechanics are then going to be clean when he sees it at that point. So he's always sort of in that threat to throw that ball as he's going through his reads. Bryce Young's a little bit like this as well, but Young does more of just getting his arms started. Young's more like he's pulling like a lawnmower, trying to start it, and he's pulling the chain on the lawnmower. That's a little bit what Young's doing. Whereas Bryce, it's full shoulders, so he's really setting himself in with his mechanics as he's going through those reads really nicely, really smoothly. 12 touchdowns, no interceptions, 1 sack, 71.9% completion percentage as it stands right now, 11.1 yard per attempt. Obviously, Notre Dame is the biggest test at this point. None of these guys have really truly been run through the ringer yet. They all have got about one opponent on their schedule so far, at least that they've been marginally tested by. But I love CJ's game, 21 years old, might have the most upside of any quarterback in this draft. Definitely, that's definitely something that I'm starting to get more narrowed in. The only question with him is a little bit of mobility. He's not exactly the guy that's going to be fleet of foot. He moves well in the pocket. He understands how to climb the pocket. He's got those kind of natural instincts. I wouldn't say he's a statue back there, but he certainly is going to be one of the lesser mobile guys of these opening guys that we're going to be taking a look at. KJ Jefferson will be my next guy here. He is obviously your kid out of Arkansas, a guy that is an absolute clone for Cam Newton, no doubt about it. I mean, he's got the towel hanging off him. He's got the number 1. He's got the body style that looks like Cam a little bit. It's like a couple inches shorter version of Cam. And he started off the year with maybe his best game against the Cincinnati Bearcats. 3 touchdown passes, a Bearcat team that, of course, last year was playing in the playoffs. It was very much a trendsetter type of win in that respect of things. It's been a little bit up and down over the last couple of weeks. Arkansas is getting their wins. They're still highly ranked. He's going to be a guy of high acclaim as we go forward. Certainly his stats aren't bad. As you can see here, he's fine overall. The thing I do like about him is that he's got a bit of an ability when he throws the ball to seem like sometimes you'll say the quarterback's pulling the string on the football. He definitely has a little bit of that. He looks like he's kind of pulling the string on the ball, even on balls where it's 15 yards down. And it's almost like at the last moment, the ball leaving his hand, he can still kind of control it, even if it's just by the fingers on the threads of the ball. It's very, very interesting in the way that he does it, and he's very good at it. I do like this year, too. He's doing a better job of improvement over last year of getting his step in the right direction. He's planning, putting his spot to the right point as far as where he wants to point and press to as far as where he's trying to throw the ball. Very, very impressive from my standpoint of looking at KJ as he's showing some improvement because it's his mechanics he most needed to clean up this year. He still gets a little bit too dead-footed for me, where he gets set down and he just sort of gets hunkered down like he's sitting down in that sofa, and he's, I'm kind of comfy right here. No, get up on those toes a little bit more. And again, it hasn't been as great here lately. He did throw for 385 yards last week. He had a couple moments where maybe the team let him down a little bit. The one thing that did stand out to me from the game last week that would have been nice with KJ was his team was down by 10 points heading into the fourth quarter. Then the running back busted off a 74-yard run. His punt returner took one back to the house. Would have been kind of nice to be able to see him in that moment if he could have overcome a little bit of that 10-point deficiency and how he would have matched up against that, as we'll see with another guy here on our list. But a guy that I do still see as being a first-round talent. His completion percentage is up this year. His average per attempt is about a yard higher. His touchdown interception is even a little better this year, and it was great last year. So awesome mobility for this guy. You can run him a little bit like a running back at times. Again, think of Cam Newton. Think this guy. They're very similar in their type of games. I don't know if I see top 10 necessarily still yet with him, but I could see him into a top 15 type area of things. Bryce Young would be our next guy, a guy that I'm not hot for our Seahawks to draft, but I have to admit he's going to probably be a higher end guy and where he's picked when it's all said and done. He is a guy that has not necessarily lit it up. He's had a good year so far. The Texas game stands out, though. You guys, I'm sure, are all readily well aware of the play that happened where he was sacked in the end zone. Would have been a safety. Would have changed a lot of the dynamics of that game, probably. Instead, the officials call a targeting penalty on Texas, which seems to have bailed out Alabama on that play. And if you talk to certain Texas Longhorn fans, they will tell you that Alabama was bailed out on quite a few calls on that particular game, a game where they won by a mere 1 point to a currently unranked Texas team that certainly Steve Sarkisian is starting to turn in the right direction. Nonetheless, He's been pretty good overall, but maybe a smidge below where he was at his Heisman pace last year. There's not been anything that he's done in his game to go forward or back from where he was to me from last year. He definitely has a live arm. I mentioned a little bit of the difference between him and CJ, where CJ's more of a shoulder turner between his reads, and what you see with Bryce is a little bit more of that. I'm gonna get the lawnmower up. I'm gonna get the lawnmower. Nope, not gonna yet. And it works for him, but there's just kind of a lot of giddy up to get himself over to his over the top delivery style of things. And he goes over the top, of course, because he is a smaller guy, because you can't afford to go sidearm when you are a little bit of that bigger guy. And a guy that just at this point doesn't excite me a lot. He just had 2 interceptions in this last game against kind of a weaker opponent here, with the University of Monroe Warhawks. 1 interception was absolutely on him, where he had about 3 years to throw in the pocket, and he's back there looking and surveying, and back there looking and surveying, and back there, and then he's like, oh, well, the hell with it. I'll just throw it 50 yards down the field and see what happens. Bad throw on that one, and one that just, again, if you're going to be that mobile guy that can buy yourself extra time, you need to be pinpoint going down the field there. You can't be kind of lazy on those type of situations. And then the interception later in the game, his receiver just dropped the ball flat out, which isn't necessarily his fault on that. But again, not really high on where I'm looking at right now with him. Takes a long time to kind of assess things in the pocket. He's got the benefit of doing that with an Alabama offensive line in front of him that's very good. He's not going to have the benefit, I don't think, of doing that at the pro level. So still a lot in my mind to be proven with Bryce, though I do think he would sneak into the first round as far as consideration right now. My list has changed a little bit here. My newest guy that I'm going to add to this list, and I'll be going through these a little faster as these guys are a little bit lower down, but the newest guy that has vaulted to the list here is Hendon Hooker out of Tennessee. This guy has, again, I'm looking for progression this year from what you saw from last year as far as the tape goes. His completion percentage is up. His yards per game is up. His touchdown to interception ratio is up. He's leading away, it would seem, from his mobility to better develop himself in the pocket versus last year, where he ran for, I believe, well over 600 yards. He has a 43 to touchdown to 0 interception ratio since he's been named just full-time starter of the Tennessee Titans. He's taken this job and ran with it. When you watch him this year and throwing the ball, it feels like he's a little bit less messy in his overall form. Last year, and watching Hendon Hooker, everything was always going in every different direction, including when he would scramble. It was a weird, just kind of mess of things going on. And he could get the ball out, and he could get out relatively accurately. And to me, the delivery is a little more consistent this year. It's a little more snappier and quicker in how he gets through it. I like how the ball's jumping off of his hand really well right now. He's a real fun prospect to look at, and I think he's developing more and more. He could get higher and higher on this list for me as I watch more and more of him, because he's not doing anything as far as really bad goes on the field. He's just been very, very solid. And in every game here, they're a team that does want to run the ball, but he's been very good in every single game, very consistent in every single game. This is a guy who might start to move up a little bit the more he can kind of build on this early performance so far this season. And I believe Tennessee's going to have some good opponents. He's also got a nice signature win against Pitt this year on top of that. This brings me to Tyler Van Dyke, who has dipped down on my list a little bit. Haven't been quite as impressed with Tyler as I was on last year's tape. The completion percentage was really weak this last week against Texas A&M, who the Miami Hurricanes lost to. I mentioned that moment with KJ Jefferson being down by 10 points to start the fourth quarter, and what can you do, kid? Well, Tyler Van Dyke got put in that same kind of situation this last week, and they just weren't able to really pull anything off. Tyler is not being helped or aided by his receivers right now. They're dropping balls right and left and forward and back and around again. So that's definitely impacting things, but it's not like the whole sole reason here either. I feel like his delivery is getting more and more sidearm the more I watch him. If it's less over the top than what I saw last year. He's got a weird thing on read options where he gets so squatted down. It's like he's popping a squat on read options. It's really weird. His legs get really wide and he just kind of, am I going to hand it off? Am I going to hand it off? Kind of odd. It's a little strange. And the more I watch him, the more I'm starting to feel like he's a little bit of a clunkier athlete. Maybe Mario Cristobal's offense doesn't do him any favors there. Certainly didn't help Justin Herbert when he was at Oregon, but I don't think that that's the sole explanation. He's just dipped down to me just a little bit here so far this year. Yards down, just hadn't looked good. Again, impacted a little bit by his wide receivers here who aren't helping him a considerable bit. And we'll go through our last two guys on this list, and I thank you for bearing me with me in the live chat. I wanted to go a little longer here on just a couple of other guys here. Last guy is going to be Anthony Richardson, another guy like Hendon Hooker, who's kind of my riser on my board right now. He burst onto the scene against Utah in the opening week, played really well, heady game, wasn't throwing for a lot of yards, but was efficient in his throws, showing off good arm strength, even hitting in-cutting routes 15 yards down the field and putting it right on a spot, just a nice little dot. He also has some real upper-level talent as far as mobility goes out of the pocket. Him and KJ Jefferson are your 1-2 guys as far as their ability to really do damage if you're talking about as a scrambler and you're talking about as runners. They do a great job in that respect of things. I like what I see from him. He's a redshirt sophomore. I do see still a very raw, young guy to the position. There's things that just don't naturally fit him on the position quite yet that he's going to have to kind of build into his game. He's got the physical potential to do so, but he's throwing at about 50% of completion percentage rate right now in a very simplified offense. This is not an offense having him do a lot of different moving parts. Still tantalized by what you see from a physical potential, but I do wonder a little bit of this fit for our Seahawks down the lane if he does announce for this upcoming draft, in the respect of, do you want to wait a couple years for where he could really get here? Because I think it's going to take a little bit of time for him. I would be expecting him to do a little bit better than what he's doing right now, considering they do a fairly good job of staying pretty consistent running the ball, and the offense is fairly simplified overall. It's not asking him to make a whole lot of reads, but Anthony is definitely a pretty insane talent as far as overall goes. My last guy is going to be Cameron Ward of Washington State. 4 first-half touchdowns against Colorado State this past week. The more tape I watch of this guy, the more I like. He's another one of those guys like Hendon Hooker, where it's just I'm starting to get warmer and warmer and warmer to him. He stands really brave in the pocket. He'll deliver a ball and take it right in the chin, doesn't care. He's got a great control of the line of scrimmage, does Cameron Ward. He comes up, he's got people set, he'll audible if he needs to audible, he'll change protections if he needs to. They had one moment in this game where the Colorado State came up in a full house casino blitz. He recognized it fully well within time, audibled to a screenplay, a running back screen, hit the running back screen, and it was able to get them a first down. It really stood out to me just how comfortable he is at the position in there at Washington State. I like his arm strength, really good arm strength, and can throw with some touch. Not as much of a layer thrower, but it's as much as he's going to throw it hard, or he's got a little bit of touch to it. He's not kind of got that in between sort of way he kind of throw the ball at times. If you're looking for a little bit of a visual picture for Cameron Ward, picture Kyler Murray's delivery style. The way his leg sets out, the way the ball starts out low and comes up. It's the very same thing with Cameron Ward that you see. He's like a bigger Kyler Murray, but not he does none of the mobility stuff necessarily. He's mobile enough. He can move in the pocket. He's got a little bit to him in that respect. He's again, no statue back there. We got no statues really on this list, with maybe exception of, you could probably say Van Dyke's pretty close to statue-y. He's got some statue elements. He's definitely got some cement feet there a little bit, but Ward's not that way at all. And I really do like the way, as I say, a gunslinger quarterback's that guy that's back there and just, he's going to trust his arm. He's going to let it rip, can make every throw. Doesn't have to be crow hopping 2 steps to get into put all that juice on the throw that he wants to put it. He can just hit back leg and let it rip. And it really does impress me with him in what I've seen so far. Of course, he's got the notable win this against Wisconsin this year, where they really surprised a lot of people by winning that game. They've started out 3-0. He is a guy that will, I think, continue to rise here, and a guy that I'm very excited for here this as far as his stock, and if it does rise into this draft as a potential. I really like his game. Again, not a lot of gun. There's him and Will Levis to me are the real true only gunslingers in this draft. The rest of the guys are pretty under fairly well constraints and control for the type of throws they can make in their offense. And he's out there letting it rip. And that's always going to endear me to any college quarterbacks that are doing that versus these guys that are under sort of clinical-like conditions and how they're being asked to manage a particular offense. Though that's my list here early on of guys that I see here out the gate for this upcoming draft that are going to be, that's my list as it stouts as far as where I would stack them. Will Levis would be my number 1 guy, but I would say the thing that we had hoped for coming into this year was that these young guys would continue to develop beyond the top guys, that there would be a plethora.
A what? A plethora. Oh, yes. You have a plethora
Of potential quarterbacks entering this draft. And the early version of this to me looks like you're going to probably have at least 3-4 guys taken in the first round. But I would say that you're going to easily see probably 11, 12, even 13 guys taken in the first 3 rounds of this draft. So there's going to be quite a few QBs taken. And as I'd say, I think we're very likely, of that list I just read to you right now, one of those guys, in my opinion, is very, very likely to be a Seattle Seahawk. I know Russell was taken a little bit later on, 3rd round in his particular draft. This draft would have that kind of depth for you to go and do that again. So it might be a guy beyond my list because of that. But I do think with having 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, where the team is, where the state of the team is, I think they're more likely to at least take a quarterback in the first round. And if they do, it will be probably one of these guys.